Hey everyone, I'm thrilled that you could join us today. We're diving into an amazing journey about Seraphine Delacroix, a teacher who went through an incredible near-death experience. Not only did she emerge transformed, but she also uncovered some surprising insights about God that really diverge from conventional religious teachings. So buckle up for an exciting tale filled with unexpected turns. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Just drop your city in the comments below. And if you're enjoying what you see and aren't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our future content. Now, let me introduce myself. I'm Seraphine Delacroix, an elementary school teacher based in Asheville, North Carolina. The experience I'm about to share dates back over 30 years, but believe me, the details are still crystal clear in my mind. To start, I want to emphasize that I've never been one to delve into the mystical. I was a very practical individual, rarely believing in anything that wasn't tangible. My life was rather unremarkable. Teaching, hanging out with friends, and managing my household were my daily routines. Growing up in a family that didn't prioritize religion much, we occasionally attended church services, but it felt more like a cultural obligation than a matter of faith. As I matured, I became even more skeptical, convinced that science held all the answers, and anything beyond that was just fanciful thinking. I distinctly recall a heated debate during my college years about the existence of God. I passionately dismissed it as a mere product of human imagination, a form of solace for those grappling with the harshness of reality. Little did I know that a few years down the line, my perception would be completely flipped on its head. At that time, I was married to Elias, a remarkable man of unwavering faith. He always encouraged me to explore spirituality, but I remained firm in my disbelief, viewing his convictions as naive. My life continued in its predictable pattern until one day I noticed a small lump on the right side of my neck. Initially, I shrugged it off, but as weeks passed, it grew increasingly prominent. As a teacher, being in front of children every day required a fair amount of self-confidence, and that lump began to chip away at my self-esteem. Seeking clarity, I visited Dr. Samuel Hawthorne, who reassured me that surgery wasn't necessary. Still, I was determined to rid myself of it. The fear of potentially developing a goiter loomed over me, not just for my health, but for my pride as well. After some back and forth, he finally agreed to schedule the procedure, unaware of how profoundly this decision would alter my life forever. It's funny how one choice can completely change the course of your life, isn't it? As I prepared for my surgery, I felt a swirl of nervous energy mixed with determination. I remember lying on that operating table, staring up at those glaring surgical lights. With each passing second, the anesthesia began to take hold, and honestly, it felt surreal. Dr. Hawthorne, always so calm, was right by my side, assuring me that everything would be fine. I thought, okay, I'll wake up later, bandaged and free from that troublesome goiter. But oh boy, was I in for a shock. What happened next? Well, it was something completely out of a storybook, nothing you'd find in a medical guide. Suddenly, I felt this overpowering sensation, like I was being yanked out of my very own body. Picture being whisked away into an endless dark tunnel. It felt like falling through a black hole at lightning speed. I was consumed by fear. It was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to grasp onto something solid, but all I found was emptiness around me. It was like I was plummeting into an infinite abyss, and time lost all meaning. Was it seconds? Hours? Who knows? Then, just as suddenly as it started, the downward spiral came to an end. I found myself engulfed in the warmest, most intense light I could ever imagine. A light that felt alive. It surrounded me, not blinding but soothing, almost like being wrapped in a cozy blanket. Gradually, my eyes adjusted, and I noticed a narrow bridge ahead of me, adorned with shimmering golden railings. Below it flowed a stream of water so crystal clear it seemed otherworldly. The gentle sound of the water was like music, bringing an unmatched sense of tranquility that I had never felt before. With curiosity tugging at me, I took a step toward that bridge. That's when it hit me. I wasn't alone. On the other side stood a radiant figure, glowing with its own light. As I approached, I realized it was an angelic being of exquisite beauty. She had flowing golden hair that danced around her, and her enormous, translucent wings appeared to be woven from the light itself. The angel smiled at me, and in that moment, without her saying a word, I just knew her name, Astrael. Nearby, I noticed a group of boys all dressed in immaculate white shirts. Their eyes shimmered with hope and joy. Something about them struck a chord deep within me, creating an instant connection, as if we were old friends meeting again after eons. It was all so enchanting. It was one of those moments where everything I previously believed seemed to fade away, pushed aside by something far more profound than I could comprehend. Suddenly, things I had always questioned about life and death felt trivial. In that extraordinary instance, I became acutely aware of my surroundings, fully immersed in what was unfolding around me. It felt as though the universe was pulling back the curtain, revealing its deepest truths. I was right there with Astrael and the children, and that's when the experience truly escalated. An unexplainable force began to envelop me, a sensation so intense it was like the very essence of the universe was unfolding all around. This wasn't just a fleeting emotion, it was a transformative moment that would redefine how I perceived God and existence. I had this breathtaking vision, a glimpse that I could only label as divine. It wasn't a grand figure or a booming voice, but rather an all-encompassing presence, a pure energy that seemed to weave through everything. In that sacred moment, I felt an overwhelming love radiating from this presence. It was so powerful that I sensed every part of me being drenched in compassion and understanding. Suddenly, all the religious doctrines I'd explored throughout my life appeared small-scale and limited compared to this experience. I realized that no set of beliefs, no sacred text, and no philosophical argument could fully encapsulate the divine essence I encountered. It was beyond language, beyond thought. This revelation shook the core of my understanding. I was someone who had prided myself on being skeptical and rational, yet I found myself in the midst of something that challenged all logic while simultaneously resonating as the ultimate truth of the universe. For the first time, I glimpsed beyond the surface of physical reality, touching the true nature of existence. I came to understand that God isn't some distant deity perched on a celestial throne, looking down and judging us. Instead, it is an all-encompassing energy, a universal consciousness that threads through every particle, every living being, every thought. The most astonishing part? I was part of that consciousness. There was no real division between me and this divine essence, a realization that left me both humbled and awed. There was a moment, while I was enveloped in this profound presence, where I felt an extraordinary connection to everything around me, the stars above, every living creature. It was as if a wave of unity washed over me, both uplifting and soothing. In this expanded state of awareness, I came to a realization. Life doesn't just stop when our physical form ceases to exist. Instead, it flows continuously, a journey of energy and consciousness that is always changing, learning, and evolving. Death, which once felt like a definitive end, transformed in my mind to something more like a transition, a shift to a different state of being. I realized that our purpose stretched well beyond mere existence. It's not just about being born, living, and dying. It's about spiritual growth, expanding our consciousness, and playing our part in the grand evolution of everything around us. Every choice, every thought, and every action we take influences the greater whole. As this experience unfolded, I learned that love is an incredibly powerful force, not the kind tied to romance or family, but a vast, unconditional love that binds all existence together. This universal love is what's fueling growth and change throughout the cosmos. Then, just as I began to come down from this intense experience, I felt an undeniable shift. An unseen force yanked me back, almost violently, like I was plummeting through some dark tunnel. It felt like I was being torn away from a paradise, and rather than fear, I was overwhelmed by a deep sense of loss. I longed to scream, to beg for just a bit more time in that realm of clarity and peace, but no words came out. In an instant, I found myself hovering above the operating room. What a surreal scene. I felt like an observer in my own life, watching a movie that I starred in. Below me, my body lay on the table, with Dr. Hawthorne and his team moving quickly, visibly stressed as they scrambled to stabilize me. I watched them from my detached vantage point as alarms sounded and their voices escalated in urgency. "We're losing her," I heard one voice cry out. It was truly surreal to witness my own still and pale form lying there, while I felt an exhilarating sense of life coursing through me. In that moment, a shocking realization hit me. I was screaming, but not from the physical body that lay unconscious. These cries came from deep within my very soul. They echoed as if every part of me was vehemently protesting against being yanked back into the mundane reality of the physical world. As I was hastily whisked away to the infirmary by nurses, my screams continued, yet it was troublingly clear that no one could hear them. It felt as though I was caught in a tug-of-war between two realms, my essence struggling to grasp where it truly belonged. Gradually, I sensed an inevitable pull nudging me back into my body, but oh, the transition was anything but smooth. It reminded me of trying to fit into a snug suit after reveling in the freedom of flying. What a jarring contrast. When my eyes finally fluttered open in the infirmary, a whirlwind of emotions washed over me. I was flooded with a strange mix of joy, as if every single cell in my body was celebrating merely the state of being alive. Yet, digging at me was a profound nostalgia for what I had just left behind, a longing that felt like it was piercing right through my soul. The nurses around me wore expressions of relief, though they also looked puzzled by my reaction. Caught in this emotional tempest, I found myself smiling through tears, unable to articulate the storm within me. It was then that the phone beside my bed began to ring. When one of the nurses answered and turned to me with a look of surprise, she said, "It's your mom. She wants to talk to you." Still in a haze, I reached for the receiver. Hearing my mother's familiar voice jolted me back to reality like a splash of cold water. "I'm fine, Mom," I managed, though honestly, the word fine felt woefully inadequate to capture the roller coaster I was on. As I spoke to her, trying my best to quell her worries, my thoughts wandered. How on earth could I explain everything that had just happened? How could I express an experience so far beyond normal logic and comprehension? In that moment, I grasped that my journey wasn't just about recovering from surgery. I faced the monumental task of integrating this extraordinary experience into the fabric of my everyday life. While lost in thought about all I had gone through, an unexpected memory suddenly surfaced, as if the near-death experience had cracked open a door in my mind, letting other mysterious recollections spill forth. As I lay there, a memory from long ago bubbled to the surface, an unusual episode from my younger days when I was a backpacker in Asia during the 1970s. I recalled being in a bustling city, the name lost to me now, desperately trying to board an overcrowded bus. The scene was chaotic, people jostled for space around me, voices raised in a language I barely grasped. Out of the confusion, something remarkable happened. Suddenly, I heard my mother's voice cutting through the noise, as clear as day. Her tone was urgent, the way it used to be when she sensed I was on the verge of getting hurt. "Seraphine!" she called, filled with genuine concern. Instinctively, I clutched my backpack against my chest, anxiety coursing through me. Just then, a man rushed by, brushing against my backpack where all my important documents and money were stored. At that moment, I didn't fully appreciate the significance of what had happened. All I could think about was boarding the bus and moving on with my journey. Yet now, nestled in my hospital bed, that moment replayed in my mind with startling clarity. How could she have reached out to me across such a vast distance? Could it possibly mean she possessed some kind of intuitive ability I had never acknowledged? That thought sparked recollections of other strange instances when my mother seemed to have an uncanny knowledge of events far removed from her. I used to brush these off, attributing them to coincidence or mere imagination. But given my recent experience, those memories took on a deeper significance. Was there something transcendent about our connection, a link that ventured beyond the physical realm? Did my mother, in some way, tap into that spiritual dimension I had caught a fleeting glimpse of during my near-death experience? These ponderings left me feeling unsettled. On one hand, I yearned to reach out to her, to ask if she recalled that day in Asia, and whether she knew about her own intervention. But a nagging fear held me back. What if she thought I was losing my grip on reality? Just days ago, I would have dismissed ideas like this as pure nonsense. A nurse walked into my room, drawing me away from my thoughts. She began checking my vitals and inquired about any pain I was feeling. I replied mechanically, my mind still drifting in the haze of past memories. The experience I had endured had blown open the door to a world of possibilities that I had strictly denied for so long. But reconciling these revelations with my previous beliefs felt like a daunting challenge. As I lay in the hospital bed, with the nurse adjusting my pillow, I realized that a deep conversation with my mother was essential once I got home. There were so many lingering questions, countless mysteries that needed unraveling. Perhaps my mom could shed some light on not only the strange experience I had, but also the unexplainable bond that seemed to have emerged between us. With each passing hour, I found myself caught in a tug of war between the thrill of my newfound insights and the intimidating shadows of the unknown. What else might I uncover about myself, my family, and the world around me now that my perspective had shifted? Once I was finally discharged from the hospital, I held on to a hope that everything would just fall back into place the way it used to be. But I quickly realized that nothing felt the same. That surgical experience had an indelible impact on me, one that I could no longer dismiss, no matter how hard I tried. Instead of embracing this shift in perspective, I made the mistake of trying to bury it. I doubled down on my skepticism and adopted an even more rigid atheistic stance. It felt like I was desperately trying to affirm my rationality in response to what I had gone through. My days became a blur of activity. I threw myself into sports, teaching, and the monotony of everyday tasks. Running became my escape. It was as though keeping busy would drown out the nagging questions and unsettling memories. Elias, my husband, sensed my struggle and consistently encouraged me to explore the idea of spirituality. He had always held a belief in life after death and saw my experience as a validation of his faith. But every time he broached the topic, I would either change the subject or walk away. I couldn't bear to entertain those thoughts. They made me uncomfortable. I remember one particular evening when Elias found me weeping in the bathroom. He wrapped his arms around me, asking what was wrong. I wanted to confide in him, to share the burden I was carrying, but the words just wouldn't escape my lips. How could I articulate something so confusing? How could I describe an experience that shook the very foundation of my beliefs? So I fibbed, telling him it was work stress. He knew better, of course, but he respected my need for silence, ever patient and understanding, even when I didn't deserve it. As time slipped by, I began to morph into a caricature of my former self. At teacher meetings, I was labeled the most rational one, the go-to person for logical discussions. But inside, I was grappling with so much more than anyone realized. For a long time, I found myself caught in a battle between my beliefs and experiences. I had always been skeptical, rolling my eyes at anything that hinted at the supernatural or spiritual. It was almost like I thought that by dismissing these ideas, I could convince myself that my own experiences weren't real. But deep down, I was far from at peace. When night fell and silence enveloped everything, those memories would return, reminding me of the peace I felt during that encounter with Astrael. It was a flicker of something so much greater than my usual understanding could grasp. No matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of that lingering sensation within me. I began to be haunted by frequent nightmares. In my dreams, I would plummet into a seemingly endless void, or find myself confined in darkness, crying out for help, my screams unheard. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. Elias was always there to console me, but I could never share the true source of my anguish. It felt as if my near-death experience was a secret locked in a dusty corner of my mind, something I wished would fade into nothingness. Yet the truth would sneak up on me unexpectedly, like a ghost refusing to leave. Reflecting on it now, I see how much time I wasted denying such an intrinsic part of my life. How many moments of potential understanding slipped through my fingers simply because I feared the unknown. Yet, regardless of my efforts to suppress these thoughts, some truths have a way of surfacing, unfazed by my attempts to bury them. Fast forward 35 years since that life-altering experience, and I had become adept at ignoring it, skillfully sidestepping any conversation that could lead toward spirituality. However, fate, or perhaps some cosmic design, had different ideas. It was a typical Sunday afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina. Elias was glued to the television while I sifted through my students' assignments. Suddenly, his animated voice broke through my focus. "Seraphine, "You've got to check this out." Though I hesitated, I set my papers aside and plopped down beside him on the couch. On the screen was a woman in her mid-40s being interviewed, Elizabeth Votto. She shared her own near-death experience, and I initially planned to tune it out and return to my work. But as she spoke, something in her story pulled me in. Her vivid memories, the intense light she described, the overwhelming peace and encounters with divine beings mirrored my own experiences. It felt surreal, as though she were recounting my story, and my heart raced in a way I hadn't anticipated. As I sat there, my hands began to tremble, like the sudden creaking of a door I thought I had securely locked decades ago. Memories I had buried deep within me surged forth unexpectedly, pushing their way into my mind with startling clarity. Elias must have caught on to my growing distress. He reached out and grasped my hand, worry etched across his face. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, but words escaped me. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I let them flow freely. After the interview wrapped up, silence enveloped us for what felt like an eternity. Elias simply pulled me close, offering comfort as I cried. It was a release, a mix of relief, recognition, and a newfound sense of liberation. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel isolated in my journey. In the subsequent 3 months, I dove headfirst into exploring spirituality and the afterlife. Every book I read, every documentary I absorbed, and every online discussion I joined brought fresh insights that helped validate my experience a little more. I found myself revisiting my near-death experience, shedding the fear and denial that had clung to me for so long. It became clear that my story could resonate with others facing similar journeys. I recall one night, consumed by a captivating book on near-death experiences, when Elias awoke to find me in tears once more. But this time, they were tears of joy. "I understand now," I told him, overwhelmed with relief. "I finally get what happened to me." My entire view of life, my values, and my beliefs were turning upside down, prompting me to rethink everything in light of this awakening. It felt like emerging from a long, deep slumber, seeing the world in a way I had never imagined. Eventually, I began meditating, a practice I once would have dismissed with a laugh. Yet through meditation, I found a way to tap into that serene feeling I had during my near-death experience. It wasn't exactly the same, but it served as a reminder that life holds more than what our senses reveal. As I embraced this evolving perspective, my bond with Elias deepened. I finally felt courageous enough to open up and share the innermost thoughts I had kept hidden for years. His unwavering acceptance and support were crucial in my journey of self-discovery. With each passing day, the burdens of denial I had carried began to dissipate, replaced by a liberating sense of purpose. With this fresh lens on life, I realized I needed to reconcile my past with my present, and so I decided it was time to take that significant step. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, I decided it was the right moment to finally dig into that old memory with my mom about what happened in Asia back in the 70s. So I set up a visit, and there we were, sitting together in her beautiful garden. "Hey Mom," I started, feeling a bit nervous. "Do you remember when I traveled through Asia?" She looked at me with curiosity, nodding slowly. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "There was this one day when I heard you calling me, warning me that I was in danger. Do you remember anything about that?" To my surprise, my mother didn't appear taken aback at all. Instead, she smiled warmly and held my hand, saying, "Seraphine, my dear, I've always sensed that we share something unique. I had a dream back then, so vivid. I saw you in trouble and I called your name. Waking up, I just knew something had to be wrong." In that moment, I was completely taken aback. After decades of doubt and brushing aside the mysterious, there was my own mother, acknowledging this extraordinary bond as something entirely natural. We spent the next few hours engrossed in conversation, revealing stories we had both kept hidden, afraid of being judged or misunderstood. That heart-to-heart was a real turning point for me. I realized how much of my life I had spent denying a fundamental part of myself. I started to embrace the idea that there are questions in the universe that simply defy scientific explanation. This didn't diminish the value of science. Rather, it opened me up to new possibilities. With that newfound perspective, I began to weave conversations about various spiritual beliefs into my social studies classes. To my surprise, my students welcomed it with open arms, eager to share their own family stories and beliefs. One day after class, a student approached me, her eyes filled with tears. She opened up about a near-drowning incident that left a profound impact on her. I saw this bright light and felt a peace like nothing else. She confessed she had never told anyone before because she feared they'd think she was crazy. That moment hit home for me. I realized that my own journey wasn't just about my revelation, it was about fostering a safe space for others to share their extraordinary stories too. As I continued to be vulnerable, I discovered an unexpected richness in my community. Neighbors, co-workers, even the people I encountered at the local grocery store all had their own untold experiences lingering beneath the surface. It was amazing how many shared feelings of the inexplicable, just waiting for someone to start the conversation. So I began hosting small get-togethers at my place, where people could share their stories without fear of criticism. And there by my side was Elias, always incredibly supportive and understanding. One evening, my husband wrapped his arms around me and said, "You've finally found peace within yourself." Hearing those words made me realize how true they were. For the first time in many years, I felt a sense of completeness. The battle between my logical mind and the unusual experiences I'd had finally came to a halt. I started to appreciate both sides of my personality. They complement, rather than contradict each other. Reflecting on my past, I can't help but feel a mix of compassion and gratitude. I have compassion for the fear and denial that trapped me for too long, but I'm also grateful for the journey that led me to this moment. At 58, I feel more alive and connected than I ever have. My near-death experience, which once filled me with confusion and dread, has transformed into a cherished part of who I am. It opened my eyes to the expansiveness of the universe, showed me how everything is interconnected, and taught me to remain open-minded about the mysteries life has to offer. This inner change didn't just stay personal, it permeated every area of my life, especially my teaching. I recognized that I had a unique opportunity to share my experiences with my students, enriching their education. So I started weaving discussions about philosophy, spirituality, and consciousness into my lessons. My approach wasn't to push my beliefs onto anyone. I simply wanted to foster an environment ripe for conversation and contemplation. To my pleasant surprise, my students, who once appeared disengaged, began to take an active interest. One day, I introduced a project where they would interview individuals from various cultural and religious backgrounds regarding their views on the afterlife. The results were eye-opening. Students returned not just with information, but with a newfound appreciation for the diverse beliefs that exist around us. The principal noticed the impact of my new approach and called me in. I had braced myself for a reprimand, but instead she commended me. "Seraphine, parents are saying their kids are more involved and thoughtful. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." At home, my relationship with Elias took on a wonderful new dimension. Our conversations grew richer and more profound. We even started a morning meditation practice together, an experience that deepened our connection. Elias once shared, "It feels like I'm discovering a new layer of you with each passing day. You know, I've had the unique experience of marrying you 2 times. First as the Seraphine I knew before, and now as this new, wonderful version of yourself. I cherish both versions equally." Alongside this transformation, my relationship with my mother has blossomed too. We've started to delve into the depth of our special bond and discovered that occasionally we can actually sense each other's emotions from afar. It's a bit mind-boggling, really. While it would have terrified me before, now it piques my curiosity. But I won't lie, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. Some of my longtime friends decided to distance themselves after I began to view life through this new lens. That realization stung, but I totally got that it was a necessary part of my journey. At the same time, however, new friendships were blossoming. People who resonated with me and offered fresh perspectives that helped broaden my understanding. One of the things I started doing was giving talks to local groups, sharing my near-death experience. Can you believe I was actually anxious at first? I was afraid they'd take a skeptical stance, just like I used to. But the reaction was incredible. After my speeches, folks would approach me, some with tears in their eyes, expressing gratitude for finally hearing their own unvoiced experiences reflected back at them. A standout moment was when I got invited to speak at a medical conference focusing on near-death phenomena. I was genuinely taken aback by how receptive so many healthcare professionals were to what I had to say. A neurosurgeon even approached me later to tell me, "Your story made me rethink everything I thought I knew about consciousness." How cool is that? As I grew more recognized in certain circles, I began receiving invitations to participate in scientific research related to these experiences. I jumped at the chance. It felt empowering to contribute to the dialogue around what was once dismissed as merely spiritual. It's fascinating to witness science starting to engage with questions that used to be off limits. Throughout this entire experience, I've worked hard to stay grounded. I never wanted to be seen as a guru or some sort of authority with all the answers. I've made it a point to keep my skeptical and rational mindset while also remaining open to the mysterious aspects of life. When I look back, that near-death experience was truly a turning point for me. I transitioned from being a closed-minded educator to someone who embraces the wonders of existence, always eager to learn and evolve. Most importantly, I've learned to appreciate each day, recognizing how precious every moment is and how much potential it holds for growth and understanding. Now, as I sit here in my cozy office, surrounded by books and letters from students, I often reflect on this incredible journey my near-death experience has taken me on. It's really surprising to think how much time has flown by since that unforgettable moment in the surgical room. That experience flipped my perspective completely. Above all, I came to realize that life is much deeper and more intriguing than I ever thought possible. The connection I felt to everything around me wasn't simply a figment of my imagination or a side effect of anesthesia. It was genuine, as concrete as the ground I stand on, and it reshaped how I perceive existence. I came to understand that death doesn't mean the end of everything. It's more like a transformation, a transition to a different form of existence. True, I still grapple with the idea of death, like anyone might, but that once paralyzing fear has morphed into a spark that drives me to savor every single day. I find joy in each moment, embracing life as fully as I can. One of the big lessons I took away from this experience is about having an open mind. For far too long, I let my skepticism blind me to the wonders of the world. It's become clear to me that we can marry critical thinking with openness to things that might seem outlandish. Science and spirituality aren't adversaries. They're complementary paths leading us toward deeper truths. I also discovered the transformative power of love and compassion. The profound love I felt during my near-death experience isn't limited to some ethereal afterlife. It's something we can nurture and express every day. I strive to carry this love into every interaction, whether it's with my family, students, or even people I meet casually on the street. It's fascinating how a small act of kindness can ripple out and create a wave of positive energy. My experience helped me recognize that we are all interconnected. We're not solitary entities. Instead, we belong to a vast network of relationships and energies. Each thought and action we take ripples through this web, reminding me to be more mindful about how I live my life. Another intriguing insight I gained on this journey is about consciousness itself. What I learned challenged my previous notions, revealing that consciousness extends far beyond what our brains can comprehend. This opened up a plethora of questions that have made me rethink what I thought I understood about the human mind. And let me tell you, sharing my experience was a game changer. I spent years keeping it to myself, terrified of what others might think. But once I started to open up, a whole world unfolded. I realized many people had their own incredible stories to share, and this created safe spaces for genuine conversation and connection. You know, as I reflect on my life, I realize how much these discussions have become central to my purpose. The road hasn't always been smooth. There were tough times filled with fear and uncertainty, where I found myself questioning everything. Yet every single challenge pushed me to evolve and deepen my understanding of who I am and the world around me. Now at 58, I feel more connected and alive than I ever have. My near-death experience, I don't view it simply as a harrowing event. Instead, it feels like a profound gift that transformed my path. It opened the door for me to help others discover meaning in their own stories. To anyone out there who might have gone through something like that, let me assure you, you are not on this journey alone. Your feelings and experiences matter. They are rich with significance. Don't shy away from exploring them, questioning them, or even sharing them with others. And to those who haven't had a similar experience, my advice is this: keep your mind wide open. The universe is a tapestry of wonders, far beyond our comprehension. There are enigmas that science has yet to touch, and that's what makes life so thrilling and beautiful. As I put down these final thoughts, a wave of gratitude washes over me. I'm thankful for this life, the journey I've walked, and the lessons that have shaped me. I appreciate every individual who has crossed my path and contributed to my growth, and I'm truly grateful for the chance to share my story. I hope it brings some comfort, inspiration, or at least a different perspective to someone reading it. Life is this amazing adventure, brimming with mysteries and marvels. Embrace it fully, keep your heart open, and never stop asking questions. The journey of learning and growing never truly ends, does it?